Assalamu alaikum and welcome to RoundUp.
We're here with the news from all around the world, but let's take a quick look at what we have in store for you today.
In this episode, we have the latest on Gaza and calls for peace. Then we head to Frankfurt for an annual book fair. And finally, we discover the significance of grapes in the Holy Qur'an.
It seems like we're going to be covering a lot of interesting stuff this week, but first, let's take a quick look at what's in the news.
What's happening in this week, Arshman?
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to today's news lineup. This week, King Charles III delivered his inaugural parliamentary opening address since taking the throne. This also marked the first King's speech to take place in Britain in over 70 years. The speech outlined 21 laws that ministers intend to pass in the next year-long session of Parliament. These included government policies in areas spanning the economy, foreign policy and criminal justice. Nasser and Ghani, have you heard? NASA has confirmed that stargazers have until 2025 to view Saturn's iconic rings before it tilts edge-on with Earth, turning the rings into an almost invisible line. The rings will slowly become visible again as Saturn's southern pole tips towards our planet, with the best view peaking in 2032. Astronomers say the tilting of Saturn should make it easier for stargazers to pick out some of the 140 moons which orbit the giant planet. We're back this week with an exciting cricket update. The semi-finals has already filled 3 of their slots, with India leading the way as the first team to qualify, followed by South Africa. Australia secured the 3rd spot with a sensational performance against Afghanistan, with Maxwell's unbeaten 201 even as he battled through injury. Let's see who else emerges victorious in this week's semi-final. Those were our top stories this week. Now passing back over. I am excited to see the reports lined up for us today.
Jazakallah for the summary of the news. It's now time for our weekly discussion on beloved Hudur's Friday sermon. Let's head over to Talha and Rohail for a summary on the latest sermon.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to this week's Friday sermon discussion. Today, we're discussing what beloved Hazur Eid Allah bin Nasr al-Aziz delivered in his recent sermon about some important events from the early days of Islam and their relevance to the world today.
During the recent sermon, we learned about Jannat al-Baqi, a historical cemetery in Medina. Did you know it was established back in 2 after Hijri? It's a special place with many trees. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, selected it as the cemetery for Muslims. The first Muslim to be buried there was Hazrat Uthman bin Mazun, may Allah be pleased with him.
Absolutely, and Hazrat Uthman bin Mazun was known for his piety and devotion to God. He wanted to live a life of worship, but the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ guided him to strike a balance between devotion to God and fulfilling responsibilities to family and community.
That's an important lesson for us today, balancing our religious duties with our responsibilities to family, society and ourselves. Let's move on to the expedition of the Amr.
The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had to defend Medina when some tribes planned to attack, but they scattered when they heard what he was coming. It's a reminder of how important it is to protect our communities and stand up for justice.
Absolutely. And just like the early Muslims faced external and internal threats, people in some parts of the world today also face challenges. One example is the Palestinians. It's important to pray for them and speak out against injustice.
It's heartening to see so many people uniting for justice, and we should always remember that no one escapes accountability in the hereafter. We must focus on prayers and hope for a better future for all.
Beloved Hazur also mentioned the expedition of Zayd bin Haritha. This was about intercepting trade caravans that were using profits for harmful purposes. It's similar to how sanctions are imposed today, although for different reasons.
That's right. It's a reminder that actions have consequences. Governments should act responsibly and fairly, but we also have a duty to stand up for justice and protect our communities when necessary.
Hazur Ayadullah bin Nasr al-Aziz also reminded us to keep praying for the people of Palestine, especially in these difficult times. Some non-Muslims, politicians and even some Jewish people are now beginning to speak out against the injustice.
That's right. It shows that small voices can make a big difference. And there's hope. with a daily pause in fighting for 4 hours to send aid to Palestine. But we must remember, there's still a lot of suffering during the other 20 hours.
Although governments and politicians often have their own interests, but we should focus on what's right and just. Hazur Ayatollah bin Nasr al-Aziz reminded us that Allah gives respite only for a certain time.
So, dear viewers, our final takeaway for today is that we should continue to pray for the Palestinians, stand up for justice, and always remember there's more to life than just this world.
That's it for this week's Friday Sermon discussion.
Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah Talha and Rohel for those key points from the Friday sermon. It's now time for our special report with the latest in the situation in Gaza. Ghani, what's happening in Gaza this week?
Well, the death toll in Gaza is well over 10,000 as Israel continues to strike indiscriminately. Israeli army movements over the past week have split the Gaza Strip into two, as officials say the army is advancing into Gaza City. Tens of thousands of civilians have been making the journey from northern Gaza to the south as Israeli authorities opened 4-hour daily humanitarian pauses to allow for evacuations. For the hundreds of thousands that remain in the north of Gaza, the situation is dire, with continuous bombings and lack of basic necessities. No bakeries are active due to the lack of fuel, water and flour. There has been no food assistance delivered to the north in the past week. 650 aid trucks have now been able to enter the Gaza Strip in the past 2 weeks, but fuel is still banned and drinking water only serves just 4% of Gaza's residents. The lack of fuel is shutting down key services in the few remaining hospitals, including the imminent closure of the only provider of maternity services. Deadly raids across the West Bank have caused record-high death tolls, according to the UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees. The UNRWA said on Thursday that 99 of its staff have been killed in Gaza since the 7th of October. Felipe Lazzarani said that cutting off food, water and medicine to the residents of Gaza is a collective punishment. As the situation continues to deteriorate, NATO allies calls for a humanitarian pause, and the UN Secretary-General once again appealed for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, saying that Gaza was becoming a graveyard for children. While protests continue worldwide, hundreds of others are gathering in solidarity to pray for peace.
In Haifa, Israel, not far from Gaza, some 600 Jews and Muslims gathered at the Ahmadiyya Muslim community's Mahmoud Mosque to call for peace. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Haifa has organized a number of interfaith events, bringing together Jewish rabbis, Christian pastors, Muslim imams, people of faith and others. Together, they emphasize the importance of coexistence and a shared value to work towards.
כשראיתי את ההזמנה, ידעתי ותמיד אמרתי שהטוב יוכל לצמוח אך ורק בחיפה, ואתם הנכס הכי גדול שיש לעיר. תמיד חשבתי ככה, אבל היה לי, זאת לא הייתה הפתעה שזה מתחיל כאן. אני רק רוצה לברך ולהגיד שוב תודה על הנוכחות שלכם, על מה שאתם עושים.
This act of unity serves as a beacon of hope in a region marred by discord and conflict, embodying the core message of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, love for all, hatred for none. This was also the message at the Prayers for Peace event held at the Baitul Futuh Mosque last week.
Say salam, say shalom when you meet. Spread the message of peace as you greet. Love for all and hatred for none.
Representatives of Christianity, Judaism and Islam took to the stage to promote the message for peace, harmony and interfaith dialogue.
To come here and to pray for divine intervention, as was said, is so important, and to not only call for what has to happen now, there has to be the aid getting in now, there has to be a de-escalation of violence, but also for that long-term peace.
The event concluded with a collective prayer for peace.
If you are like me, sitting at home and seeing these horrible images from Gaza for the past month, you may be wondering what it is that you can do to make a difference. Well, our beloved Azul gave us some guidance in a virtual meeting last week. Have a listen.
फ़लस्तीन या यूक्रेन या चाहे इज़राइल में मासूम बच्चे और लोग जो मर रहे हैं उनके लिए जो पुरअमन एहतजाज होता है, क्या हम उसमें हिस्सा ले सकते हैं?
हाँ बिल्कुल ले सकते हैं, लेकिन बाज़ दफ़ा ये होता है कि जो एहतजाज ऑर्गेनाइज़ करने वाले होते हैं ना, वो बाज़ दफ़ा फनेटिक किस्म के लोग होते हैं जो पुरअमन एहतजाज को शिद्दत पसंदी में बदल देते हैं, तोड़ फोड़ शुरू कर देते हैं। आप यहाँ एहतजाज कर रहे हैं उनके लिए, और एहतजाज करते करते अपने मुल्क की प्रॉपर्टी को नुकसान पहुँचाने लग जाएँ, सड़कों के पोल तोड़ने लग जाएँ, लाइटें तोड़ने लग जाएँ, या बोर्ड तोड़ने लग जाएँ, या आगे लगाने लग जाएँ, ये चीज़ें गलत हैं, वो नहीं होना चाहिए। अगर पुरअमन एहतजाज है उसके हक़ में बोर्ड उठा के वो कर सकते हैं, आप उसमें हिस्सा लेने में कोई हर्ज नहीं है। और सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि यहाँ भी अहमदी जो हैं वो यहाँ मुख्तलिफ़ मुल्कों की जो एम्बेसीज़ हैं उनके एम्बेसडर को, सफ़ीरों को ख़त भी लिखें, अपने सियासतदानों को भी ख़त लिखें कि फ़लस्तीन के लिए या मज़लूमों के लिए जो दुनिया में जो जुल्म की चक्की में पिस रहे हैं, उनको कोशिश करनी चाहिए और अपना रसूल रसूख इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए। और हमारी ये ख्वाहिश है कि दुनिया में अमन कायम हो। तो ये पैगाम अगर हर अहमदी की तरफ से चला जाए, सब सियासतदानों को भी, अपने अपने हल्के के और एम्बेसडर्स को भी, तो इसका भी अच्छा असर पड़ेगा, और ये भी खामोश एहतजाज का एक हिस्सा ही है। ठीक है?
Jazakallah Ghani. We are all continuing to pray and do what we can. Now let's head over to Germany, where Josephine visited the Frankfurt Book Fair to find out what this event is all about.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Wir sind hier auf der 75. Buchmesse in Frankfurt. Ich gehe hier schon sehr viele Jahre hin. Ich kann mich nicht mehr erinnern, wann ich das erste Mal hier war. Jedes Jahr treffe ich sehr tolle Autoren und finde interessante neue Bücher. Ich bin schon gespannt, was ich dieses Jahr alles Neues entdecken werde. Dieses Jahr findet die 75. Frankfurter Buchmesse statt. Hier werden die neuesten Bücher präsentiert, Preise verliehen, Gespräche mit Autoren werden geführt und noch vieles mehr. So eine große Buchmesse wie hier in Frankfurt gibt es sonst nirgends auf der Welt. Es kommen jedes Jahr zahlreiche Verleger, Autoren und Bücherliebhaber wie ich hier zusammen. Besonders ist, dass die Buchmesse durch ihre internationale Bekanntheit sehr bunt ist und viele Kulturen hier vertreten werden. Jedes Jahr gibt es ein bestimmtes Land als Ehrengast. Dieses Jahr ist es Slowenien. Deswegen wird es hier nie langweilig und es gibt immer etwas Neues zu entdecken. Der Verlag der Islam ist auch auf der Frankfurter Buchmesse vertreten. Ich werde jetzt ein paar Fragen an eine Standbetreuerin fragen. Assalamualaikum. Wie lange ist der Verlag der Islam schon auf der Buchmesse vertreten?
Alhamdulillah ist die Jamaat durch den Verlag des Islam seit 51 Jahren auf der Buchmesse vertreten. Letztes Jahr war das 50-jährige Jubiläum und da hat die Jamaat auch ein Zertifikat zu diesem 50-jährigen Jubiläum übergeben bekommen. Das heißt, wir sind schon seit 51 Jahren.
Und welche Fragen stellen die Buchmessenbesucher so?
Da zurzeit dieser Nahostkonflikt halt sehr aktuell ist, werden sehr viele Fragen diesbezüglich gestellt, was unsere Stellung dazu ist und wie wir das Ganze betrachten. Und zusätzlich, da wir als Frauen hier vertreten sind, haben Menschen auch die Möglichkeit, direkt den Frauen zum Thema Frauen im Islam die Fragen zu stellen. Und da haben wir auch sehr viele Fragen zum Thema Frauen-Islam gestellt bekommen.
Und wie ist die Atmosphäre auf der Buchmesse so?
Eigentlich eine sehr schöne Atmosphäre. Man sieht, dass hier viele intellektuelle Menschen vertreten sind. Die Entwicklung, die wir diesmal feststellen konnten, ist auch, dass hier sehr viele junge Menschen zu uns gekommen sind und sich für den Islam interessiert haben. Und ja, eigentlich sehr schön hier.
Okay, danke schön. Zuletzt habe ich mir als Souvenir noch eine arabische Kalligraphie mit meinem Namen machen lassen. Ich finde, sie sieht richtig schön aus. Das war wieder ein schöner Buchmessetag. Ich fand die Atmosphäre hier sehr schön und habe tolle Bücher entdeckt. Ich freue mich jetzt nach Hause zu gehen und gemütlich zu lesen.
Wow, that book fair looked incredible. You know, there are book fairs like these in many cities around the world. So you should definitely find out if there's one happening near you.
Definitely. And you know, one of the books that the Ahmadi bookstore featured was the Holy Qur'an. So our next report is all about the significance of grapes in the Qur'an. Let's have a look.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another segment in our series where we talk about foods mentioned in the Holy Qur'an. Today we're going to be finding out more about a very tasty and juicy fruit, grapes. Grapes are mentioned in the Holy Qur'an, and we produce there within gardens of grapes and the olive and the pomegranate, similar and dissimilar. Look at the fruit thereof when it bears fruit, and the ripening thereof. Surely in this are signs for a people who believe. The earliest evidence of cultivated grapes was found at Gadakrili Gora, near the village of Imri in southeastern Georgia, which was thought to have been from about 6000 BC. There is over 10,000 varieties of grapes worldwide, but they can also be dried to make raisins, or preserved in jams and jellies, or crushed to make juice. Did you know that grapes grow in clusters on vines and need plenty of sun to ripen? When untrained, grapevines can reach up to 17 meters or more. Grapes provide many health benefits as they are packed with vitamin B, C, and K. Did you know that 80 grams of grapes, about a handful, count as one of your 5 a day? Grapes have antioxidant properties and may help in supporting the health of eyes and brain. They also help in lowering blood pressure and cholesterol levels, thereby protecting against heart diseases. Fun fact, have you ever eaten currants, sultanas, or raisins and wondered what the difference was? Well, they are all made from different types of dried grapes. So, how do you grow grapes? I went to meet a Lajna member who has won awards for her gardening projects. She showed me how to use a cutting to grow a new grape plant.
I have done this one before. I have taken cutting from this plant. Now I'll show you how to do it. You can make this. We don't need that many leaves. So make sure when you put it in, these notes should be in the soil. And before planting, you can use some bone meal, fish blood. This is oyster shell. Then you can make sure all these 3 notes are in. And then here you are. You can put water. Make sure that the holes should be covered with a stone or something, because if we won't do it, then this soil will go in there, and if there is too much water, it will stay and it will ruin the plant. So this is how you have to do it.
That's it for this episode. Make sure to stay tuned for all other episodes on foods mentioned in the Holy Qur'an.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for in today's episode. So don't forget to join us next week when we'll be covering even more interesting topics from all around the world.
And if you'd like to give us any feedback, feel free to contact us on our social media or email us at roundup@mta.tv.
But in the meantime, feel free to check out our Instagram where you can find extra exciting content that we have for you.
And once again, Jazakallah for joining us today in today's episode. And we'll hope you join us next week as well. But until next time, Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, I shall call, oh, I shall call, I shall call, oh, I shall call, I shall call. Thy message to reach all the corners of the earth. Oh, I shall call, oh, I shall call, I shall call, oh, I shall call, I shall call. Thy message to reach all the corners of the earth. Oh, I shall call, oh, I shall call, I shall call, oh, I shall call, I shall call. Thy message to reach all the corners of the earth.